Welcome back to the First Gnostic Church of Christ. This is video 2 for the reading commentary on the origin of the world. In video number 1, we closed discussing the section called Yaldabaoth establishes his rule. Once he was able to possess authority over matter, Pistis Sophia withdrew up to her light. The next section picks up from there, entitled Yaldabaoth creates heaven and earth and bears 3 sons. Now, we're going to find out Yaldabaoth is not the one who actually creates heaven and earth, even though this writer inserted this title for this paragraph. When the ruler saw his greatness, he saw only himself. He saw nothing else except water and darkness. In the pleroma, there is water and light, but in the realm of chaos, there is water and darkness. So water is a significant substance that exists both in the pleroma and in the kenoma. It in fact is the bridgeway between the dark realm and the realm of light. The realm of light is where the true Father resides. The false father resides in the realm of darkness. Darkness can be thought of as the realm of the material, which is the substance brought about by the light or the will of the Father acting through Sophia, and from Sophia acting through Yaldabaoth to bring about the shadow and then matter. Matter itself contains gnosis within it, so it's able to bring forth through its logos all things. Now this logos is called the Word. I'm going to take us over to John chapter 1, the King James Version, where it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." In other words, excuse the pun, in the beginning, meaning the beginning of the creation as we know it, because with God, the true Father, there is no beginning, but in the beginning of when humanity, the concept of humanity, was first thought of, the Word was spoken. First as a thought and then took shape by word. And it's no coincidence that in this realm called the kenoma, we have a thought in silence, and words are formed by how we articulate our vocal system, whether it be our vocal cords, our mouth, our tongue, how we use air. This is the apparatus called the Word. Word can be thought of as the vehicle by which all things are created, also known as the Christ. This logos, called the Word, there's also many words we use off of this, such as logia, logic, which ultimately means word. This same was in the beginning with God. So this mechanism is what's called the Word, this process by which all things are created and all things are made. It is both the Logos and the Christ. It is through the Christ that all things were created. And this is called the Word. So the water itself allows for a vehicle by which the Word can have a sounding board and allow for ripples and then shadows, ultimately bringing form. And that form then is brought through its name, a specific entity with its own characteristics, whether it be an aeon, whether it be an angel, an archon, the demiurge, humankind, each and every one of us. So water and light are the substance of all things, and the lack of light is called darkness. Darkness is the space by which potential exists, for which the light emanates into and moves and brings about the will of the Father. Darkness allowing for that empty place, that void, so that a space may be provided for which the will of the Father can be formed and manifested. This is the process by which all things are emanated, but it's done so through the Word. Just as we have a thought, the way in which we can share that thought is through our words. And so God is sharing His creation through words, and it's manifesting and being received, perceived, and manifested in this realm. And all things were made by Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made. And again, this is referring to Father, Mother, Monad, through the Christ. The combination of the Father working through the Christ, the Mother working through the Christ, is called the Word. It's called the Logos. So it is in the self-same time God, the Christ. Now, the Catholic Church will interpret this to mean the Trinity, meaning that Christ is God, the Father is God, and the Holy Spirit is God. At the First Gnostic Church of Christ, we do not have that understanding. All things are of God, but not all things are God. All things are sons and daughters of God, or creations of God, but not all things are God. And Christ is the vehicle by which Word is made manifest. as it continues, in him was life, and life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, a darkness comprehended it not. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John, and this is John the Baptist. The same came for a witness, to bear witness of the light, that all men through him might believe. He was not that light, but was sent to bear witness of the light. And remember I said, the light emanating into the darkness brings about form and shape. Through Sophia, through the Borbello, through the feminine quality of God, the will is taken shape into the darkness. That was the true light, which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. And this, of course, is God, the true Father, working through the Word, working through Christ. This part, this understanding, was not known by man. The world did not know of this understanding, the true understanding of God. He came unto his own, and his own received him not. But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name, which were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the Word was made flesh, and dwelt among us. And we behold his glory, the glory as the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Now, I am reading this to you because it is essential you understand this before we go on. Mainly for not only what's getting ready to be said, but also because the title is misleading. Yaldabaoth did not create heaven and earth, as we're getting ready to see here. So this title, ignore it. As you can see very clearly in the canonical text, John very clearly outlines that it is God through Logos, or the Word, that he brings about all creation, the heaven and the earth. And it is through Christ that he accomplishes this. And so let's read this very carefully. Waters is the substance, it's the vehicle that repels or attracts all things. It's the essence in the pleroma and the substance in the kenoma. A substance that attracts form in the kenoma, but an essence that attracts light and will in the pleroma. When the ruler saw his greatness, he saw only himself. He saw nothing else except water and darkness. Again, water is the soul. It's the memory bank. It's the emotions. In astrology, we attribute the element of water to emotions. Darkness is void. It is that thing that is not light. It's empty of light, empty of life. It has no definition, no purpose, no life. It does not exist, and yet it does. This is the paradox. Then he thought that he alone existed, Yaldabaoth. His thought was made complete by means of the Word. Now, this is very crucial point in this section. Let's read that carefully. His thought, Yaldabaoth's thought, was made complete by means of the Word, by means of the Christ. You see? And it appeared as a spirit moving to and fro over the waters, meaning the Word, Christ energy. Remember, Yaldabaoth has no spirit, so this didn't come from him. But what did proceed from him was the thought of creating, but he does not do the actual creating. Now, he believes that everything around him that he sees, the water and the darkness, and now that darkness and water taking form and shape due to the light of Sophia, from the Mother Father entering through Yaldabaoth, moving the water and the darkness to take shape based upon the will of the Father. He believes that is his doing, and it is not. And it appeared as a spirit moving to and fro over the waters. And when that spirit appeared, the ruler separated the watery substance to one region and the dry substance to another region. From matter, he created a dwelling place for himself and called it heaven. And what he does do, he simply removes some of the water. Now, he doesn't actually create anything. What he does do is he creates a dry region. So he has the power to move things around, to shape things, form things. And he does this in that space he creates, he calls heaven. And then he does the same thing, and from the matter the ruler created a footstool and called it earth. And he creates in his mind this idea of a footstool. But he didn't actually create earth. Earth itself was created from the Mother Father, the heavens, the universe, through Christ and Sophia. The body of Sophia is the form. It is through the Christ that the will of the Father and Mother is brought into this realm. But Yaldabaoth himself can take no account of having created heaven or earth. These are just concepts in his mind. that he creates. He creates these concepts, but he doesn't create the actual heaven and the actual earth. Now, one thing he does do, however, he creates material things. So the substance of earth itself, he's partially responsible for creating. Afterward, the ruler thought according to his nature, and he created an androgynous being. Remember, Yaldabaoth is an androgynous being. So you can see that it's thought that brings about things in the realm from Yaldabaoth. These beings called archons. Beings by means of the word. Again, it is through word that these things are brought about. And yet Yaldabaoth is ignorant of that fact. He opened his mouth and cooed to him, this androgynous being that he created. When his eyes were opened, he saw his father, and he said to him, Yi. So his father called him Yao, which is, of course, another way of saying Yahweh. And then ultimately, this Yahweh becomes one who Yaldabaoth favors over his other sons. Again, he created the second son and cooed to him. He opened his eyes and said to his father, Hey. So his father called him Eloi, meaning Elohim. Now, these creatures, or these beings that he brings about, are called the seven rulers that we talked about in the secret book of John. So let's take a look at the secret book of John, and we're going to read around chapter 11. He created for himself another aeon inside a blaze of luminous fire, which still exists now. And he was stupefied in his madness, the one who dwells within him, and he begets some authorities for himself. And he then goes about to create 12 authorities. But if you go down further, you'll see that he set up 7 kings over the 7 heavens, 1 per firmament of heaven, and 5 over the depth of the abyss, so that they might rule. And so the depths of the abyss is essentially the area called hell. And he divided his fire among them, but he did not send them anything from the power of the light which he had received from his mother. Of course, he's greedy because he's the only God in his mind. Now, this weak ruler has 3 names. The first is Yaldabaoth, the second Saklos, the third is Samael. He is impious in his madness, she who dwells in him. For he said, I am God, and no other God exists except me. And then these are the bodies of the names of the rulers created 7 powers for themselves. And these are the bodies of the names: Athoth, Eloio, Astaphaos, Yao, Sababaoth, Adonin, Sabbaty. This is the hebdomad of the week. So we get 7 days of the week. You see, astrotheology is very significant in the world of Yaldabaoth because we're dealing with the will of life, talked about in Ezekiel, the will within the will, that he had a vision about. And it continues, and again he created the third son and cooed to him. He opened his eyes and said to his father, As. So his father called him Astaphaos. These are the 3 sons of their father. Now, why are these 3 sons significant out of the 7? They're significant because they represent 3 aspects of what's in the pleroma. Astaphaos represents Sophia, Yao represents Yaldabaoth, and Eloi represents Elohim, which is the true mother-father. Now you can see that part of this puzzle that Yaldabaoth missed was a representation of the Christ. So he missed that part. He didn't see it. And that is, of course, he's missing spirit or gnosis. He doesn't get that part. And that's what causes him to ultimately fail in his endeavors, and as to why he's the blind god. Next section, the 7 heavens of chaos. 7 appeared in chaos as androgynous beings. This is the 7 we were talking about. They have their masculine name and their feminine name. The feminine name of Yaldabaoth is Forethought, Sambethus, which is the weak. His son is called Yaoth, and his feminine name is Lordship. Sababaoth's feminine name is Divinity. Adonaios' feminine name is Kingship. Eloios' feminine name is Envy. Oraoios' feminine name is Wealth. Astaphanias' feminine name is Sophia. These are the 7 powers of the 7 heavens of chaos. You see, essentially what Yaldabaoth is doing, he is creating off of a template, and a very fuzzy one at that, from what he saw from the light waters above him. And so he's missing 3 essential parts to this creation that he's bringing about, as there are 10 lights that stand before the Christ, not 7. He creates 10 luminaries, but then only 7 of those 10 luminaries have powers. And they came into being as androgynous beings according to the immortal pattern that existed before them. And we talked about that immortal pattern, which was the light waters that he saw above him from the pleroma. and in accord with the will of Pistis. So he's doing this because through Sophia, she is giving him the authority to do so that he can rule over matter, so that the likeness of what existed from the first might rule until the end. Meaning, in other words, that whether Yaldabaoth is aware or unaware of his creation or formation, it still takes after the pattern of the true Father-Mother. This is all he has to go by. And so, therefore, in the end, everything is in the pattern of the immortals or God, Mother Sophia, and the aeons, and the pleroma. You will find the function of these names and the power of the males in the Archangelic Book of Moses the Prophet. Now, I haven't been able to find this particular book, so if anyone knows of where to find this book, let me know. But the feminine names are in the book of Noriah, and this one is taken from the last book we read, the Hypostasis of the Archons, when Noriah or Noria is pleading to the true Mother Father when the Archons attempt to essentially rape her, and the angel or Aeon, Lilith, comes down. This also is in a Nag Hammadi text called Thought of Noria, and that one you can have access to, and we'll be able to read and comment on at some point on this channel. Now, since the chief ruler Yaldabaoth had great authority created for each of his sons, the means of the word beautiful heavens as dwelling places, and for each heaven great glories 7 times exquisite. Each one has within his heaven thrones, dwelling places and temples, as well as chariots and spiritual virgins and their glories, looking up to an invisible realm, also armies of divine, lordly, angelic, and archangelic powers, myriads without number, in order to serve. In other words, I'll give you all this, you obey me. This is what Yaldabaoth does. And this is the logos of this ram, the logos of Yaldabaoth. This is how he governs. This is the way he thinks. This is the way the material realm works. It must take from you what was given, and if it takes from you, then in return it will give to you. This is the realm of harmonies, of the orbs, constantly in motion, exchanging left and right, but never shall the two meet. The report concerning these you will find accurately in the first account of Noriah. Now, they were completed in this way up to the 6th heaven, the one belonging to Sophia. And again, this is wisdom. Now, Sophia, there is a Sophia called Sophia Pistis and Sophia Zoe Sophia. Now, this is the one belonging to Zoe Sophia, from which all life emanates in the Kanoma, the physical life. But above that is the Pistis Sophia, where she comes from 7th, 8th, and 9th realm and up. And the heaven and its earth were disrupted by the troublemaker, who was beneath all of them. So he is the troublemaker. He's the taskmaster. He's the one that's going to cause you to have limits, introduce death, disease, and be the adversary, the Satan, in your life, in everyone's life. And this is set forth as ordained. The 6 heavens trembled, for the powers of chaos knew who it was who disturbed the heaven beneath them. And when Pistis knew of the harm caused by the troublemaker, she blew her breath, and she bound him and cast him down to Tartarus. And so at this point, in this book, we are recounting what we already read in the Hypostasis of the Archons. At some point, Yaldabaoth was in the 7th heaven. Sophia Pistis is, in her wisdom, realizing that Yaldabaoth needs not be in the 7th heaven. So he is cast down below the 6th heaven into the place called Tartarus. And Tartarus in the Christian Greek scriptures is a prison-like abased condition into which the disobedient angels of Noah's day were cast. At 2 Peter 2:4, the use of the verb tartator does not signify the angels who sinned were cast into the pagan mythological Tartarus. Rather, it indicates that they were abased by God from their heavenly place and privileges and were delivered over to a condition of deepest mental darkness respecting God's bright purposes. Darkness also marks their own eventuality, which the scriptures show is everlasting destruction, along with their ruler, Satan the devil. Therefore, Tartarus denotes the lowest condition of abasement for those rebellious angels. It is not the same as the abyss spoken of in Revelation 20:1-3. Now, this is one person's account of this in Jehovah's Witness write-up that I'm taking from this website, jw.org. So I thought it did a pretty good description. However, the part I'm disagreeing with here is the idea that Yaldabaoth is rebellious. Yaldabaoth is the opposite of rebellious. Yaldabaoth represents laws and order. Yaldabaoth represents judgment. So he is not a god of rebelliousness. He is a god of chaos. But we must not mistaken chaos to mean the same thing as being rebellious. Yaldabaoth uses chaos to form things or to create order, and then he substantiates a law that one must follow to sustain what he knows will fall apart unless he continuously is on watch. He knows that his own creation is very delicate and is a powder keg that could fall apart with a little wind, like dust that we all are. And so he is very paranoid, and this is why he sets forth all of these laws and regulations, even down to how you enter the temple, how I want my meat cooked exactly. And this is in Leviticus, of course. So he is not rebellious. He's a troublemaker, but not rebellious. Mankind, on the other hand, the spiritual human, the Gnostic human, the pneumatic being, we are indeed rebellious. In fact, it is the very idea that we took from the tree of knowledge of good and evil that brought us where we are today. That in and of itself was an act of rebellion against the opposite of rebellion, which is Yaldabaoth. Alright, this is the last section we're going to read on this. It's called The Boasting of Yaldabaoth. Since that day, the heaven has been consolidated along with its earth by means of Sophia. So again, you see this? It isn't Yaldabaoth that brings about creation or of earth and heaven. He merely clears a space and he puts his feet on it and he claims it as a footstool, and he names it earth, and he moves some water about, and then he calls that his heaven. And he's able to create all these wonderful things, majesties and angels and archons, people that rule over you, and all this money and wealth. But in terms of actually creating anything that is of substance or substantial or that will ultimately lead to something that is of quality and will last eternally, he's unable to do that. Whatever he creates falls apart invariably, and he has to continually to set everything back into motion so that it can just repeat itself through different phases. After the heavens and their powers and all their governments set themselves aright, the chief creator exalted himself and was glorified by the whole army of angels, and all the gods and their angels gave him praise and glory. So this is what Yaldabaoth seeks after. He seeks praise, glory, and worship. The true Mother Father in the Pleroma needs nothing of that sort. The true Mother Father has no ego, doesn't need that from us. He emanated us. Why would he need us to worship him? As though he needed something from us. And he rejoiced in his heart, this is Yaldabaoth, and he boasts continually, saying to them, I do not need anything. I am God, and there is no other God but me. And you see, this is where the blasphemy occurs, because again, we are all gods. We are all sons and daughters of God. But Yaldabaoth wanted to greedily hoard it all to himself. And this is where hierarchy begins. Pyramidal structure that you see on the back of the dollar bill. The all-seeing eye that's continually watching. The big brother state. This is Yaldabaoth, because he's paranoid. But when he said these things, he sinned against all of the immortals and perishable ones, and they kept their eyes on him. Moreover, when Pistis saw the impiety of the chief ruler, she was upset or angry. Without being seen, she said, You're wrong, Samael, that is, blind God. An enlightened, immortal human exists before you. That enlightened, immortal human that she's referring to is every one of us. Our spiritual being. We are a spiritual being first, inhabiting a flesh body, not the other way around. We're not flesh beings that die and then if we're lucky we get a spirit. We are spiritual beings that are inhabiting temporarily a body to carry forth our mission in this realm. Immortal humans exist before you. Immortal human, it says, exists before you because when God created the perfect human, he created us as an entity in unity. This is why it's being referred to in the singular. Now, some might want to say this is referring to Christ, but it's not, and we will find this out by the end of the sentence. Immortal human exists before you and will appear within your fashioned bodies. See, it's plural. This is no mistake. Humans are an entity, a unity, that all have a common purpose, which is the purpose of the will of the Father, Mother. We are part of forming that purpose. But Yaldabaoth goes about and fashions bodies that human will inhabit it. These bodies give us a false perception that we're all separate, when in fact we are of the same essence. We are of the immortal human essence. The human will trample upon you as potter's clay is trampled, and you will go with those who are yours down to your mother, the abyss. For in the consummation of your works, all of the deficiency that appeared in the truth will be dissolved. It will cease, and it will be like something that never existed. Now this may sound like a very harsh ruling on Yaldabaoth, but understand in the end all the archons will be released once humankind is released. This is what we came to understand in the hypostasis of the archon in the epilogue section. The last video, go back to that last video if you're curious of understanding that in more detail. But essentially, we are not in bondage to Yaldabaoth and the archons. They are in bondage to us. So if you have any sympathy for Yaldabaoth in his condition and his archons in their condition, then it behooves you to detach yourself from this realm. It behooves all of us to do that. Because ultimately, when we are finally the last one, the last sheep that Christ talks about, that he finds, and then the fullness is brought about, then at that time also Yaldabaoth and all his archons will be released from their obsession and addiction to us. Their addiction to rule over us, essentially, you see. After Pistis said these things, she revealed the likeness of her greatness in the waters, and so she withdrew up to her light. Now I'm going to close talking a little bit around this thing called waters, because this is very important for us to understand. What is the significance of water? Why is it mentioned so much? Why is it the only substance or essence, or common thing, if you will, that is across all realms, whether it be the dark realm called the Kenoma or it be the light realm called the Pleroma? Why is this one thing prevalent in abundance? For that, we're going to go to 1 John 5, King James Version, and we're reading starting from verse 1. Whosoever believeth Jesus is the Christ is born of God, and every one that loveth him that beget loveth him also that begotten of him. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and keep his commandments. And the commandment is to love God and love your neighbor, not to judge. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous. When it talks about commandments, it's not referring to the 10 commandments. It's referring to the commandment that Christ gave to love. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and commandments are not grievous. For whoever is born of God overcometh the world, and this is the victory that overcometh the world, even our faith. Who is that overcometh the world but he that believeth that Jesus is the Son of God? And why is it significant to believe that Christ is the Son of God? Because he's the one that brought us the true Father. He is the first begotten Son, meaning there are other sons that follow, daughters to follow. This is he that came by water and blood, even Jesus Christ, not by water only, but by water and blood. And it is the Spirit that beareth witness, because the Spirit is truth. For there are three that bear record in heaven, the Father, the Word, and the Holy Spirit. And these three are one. So the Father, which is the mother, father, the monad. The Word is the formation, or the logos, taking shape, made flesh. That really is the mother. But it's Christ that activates that form, and the form takes shape. And the Holy Spirit, which binds everything together. And that is in all of us. That's the Holy Spirit. And these three are one. And there are three that bear witness in earth: the Spirit, the water, and the blood. And these three agree in one. If we receive the witness of men, the witness of God is greater, for this is the witness of God which he hath testified of his Son. So this is the testament that has bore witness: the Spirit, which is the Father, the water, which is the mother, the form, and the blood, which is the Christ. And these three agree in one. So the water that is everywhere is the mother, which is the monad, of the monad, which is the Borbello and the Sophia. And it's the feminine aspect of God, essentially. It's everywhere. The will of the Father is injecting itself into the waters, and the will of the Father is the light. And the water can exist in the darkness as well. So water is essentially potential. It is the vessel that either attracts or repels in the darkness, but emanates in the light, or from the light. And so this is what the vessel is, the waters of life. It is the essence of life itself. It's the body of life. It is the manifestation of God's will. And how we bring about unique forms is through the water. And those unique forms are brought through names. And every one of us have our unique name. And we essentially use the water to bring about our manifestation in our unique name of God. So water allows it to repel or attract, and that's every one of us. Us humans are made up of mostly water. And the blood is the Christ. So the blood contains the soul. It's the bridgeway between the spirit realm and the physical realm, which is the realm of water in the darkness. And so the bridgeway is the blood. And so when you release the blood, then the water is then also released from the form, and then it goes back to the spirit, which is the realm of the pleroma. So these three agree, and this is how these three work together. Alright, with that, we're going to pick up in our next video under the section Sabaoth worships Pistis. Now, I know this section was very metaphysical and possibly complex. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me, and I'll attempt to clarify in more detail. Alright, thanks for listening. Bye.